Z, man, I appreciate you being here, bro.
Kato, thank you so much for having me,
Of
man.
course, man. How long have we known each other
A
now?
long time.
Going back to the
The,
blog
the
era,
DJ booth
DJ
days.
booth
Yeah.
days. Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, but I didn't have any hair back then either. So
Not everything has changed.
I was going to say, as much as things have changed, some things remain the same.
There you go.
Yeah.
For those that might not be familiar with who you are,
Yeah.
obviously former co-founder or founder of DJ Booth.
Co-founder.
Co-founder of DJ Booth, prolific tweeter and debunker
Thank
of
you.
the music industry.
Thank you.
Fact checker.
Thank you.
Also Audiomack. What's your official title at Audiomack?
So I'm a co-founder of Audiomack.
Okay.
And then my official title, it's really long. Executive Vice President of Global Operations and Head of Artist and Label Services.
Fancy.
Yeah.
I like
There's
it.
a lot of slashes
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this conversation because I feel like there's a lot going on in the music industry that I want to talk to you about. Let's start here, though. First of all, I just love the way that you use X to add a lot of clarity and context to very surface level understandings of like music business topics and conversations. And you do a really good job of just like breaking things down in a way that people can understand. And you're really good at that. So props to you for that, bro.
Thank you.
Do you think it's easier or harder than ever before to be an artist today?
We're diving straight
We're
in.
diving straight in.
So what I would say is it's always been really hard to be an artist. It's always been really hard to be successful in any art form.
Yeah.
That will never change. What is challenging presently is attention. We exist and operate in an attention economy. And you're not just competing for consumers against other artists.
Yeah.
You're competing for free time in an on-demand environment alongside video and video games and social media and podcasts
Right.
and audiobooks and sports gambling and everything else that we can do in the palm of our hands with a click of a button.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the greatest challenge. I could make a great argument, and I will, though, that I believe it's the best time ever to be an artist, because historically, you either needed deep pockets, connections, and or to sign with a record label, and that was the only viable path forward.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, you needed capital to invest in the ability to record, the ability to mass manufacture and distribute,
Yeah.
the ability to do physical marketing in a real world environment. Today, you can record from the confines of your home.
Yeah.
You can, at the click of a button, upload your music and it can be available for the world to hear. And you can market in a very hyper-targeted way online. Back in the day, you used to throw out some posters, on the side of the road. It's like, well, you're spraying wide, right? And now you can identify a specific type of user who would be inclined to listen to your music and ensure that those ads appear for that user type. The hard part, though, is that because the barrier to entry, which used to be a threshold up here, is now down here,
Yeah.
it's opened up the floodgates for more artists
Right.
to enter.
Yeah. There's just more.
Yeah.
There's more of everything.
There is, and I think the perception has been for a long time because we all want to believe what we see on the internet that this is easy, but it's not easy.
Right.
It's very difficult. It's always been difficult. It will always be difficult. And I think what we're seeing in real time is artists are figuring that out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting because I feel like we're in a time where everyone is a critic. Everyone is like skeptical of everything, especially authority.
Yeah.
And so this narrative of industry plants has become so prevalent in the last couple years, especially with social media. Where do you think that comes from? Like, do you honestly, because I've seen your tweets debunking this concept of industry plants, do you not think that major labels can manufacture an artist in 2025?
Oh, they cannot. So much so that the major labels have largely given up on artist development. They are in the audience acquirement stage of their trajectory, right? They cannot get you from 0 to 60. Maybe a boutique label who has a ton of patience and deep pockets, but the majors are more inclined to let you do the legwork, get to 60,
Yeah.
and then once you're there, throw gasoline onto the fire. I remember back in the day when we were publishing articles at DJ Booth, our former managing director, shout out to Nathan Slavic,
I remember Nathan.
he coined the term Mindy, which was a major label artist that is operating or masquerading as an independent,
Right.
with the specific intention of trying to fool consumers.
Right.
So this idea that if you were known to be a major label artist, it would take away some of the mystique, right? Ooh, you sign, like, all right, I'm off of you.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to operate as though you're independent. You're grinding for everything that you're getting, but you're being funded and supported by the major label system. And there were a lot of artists who were Mindies, like Logic was an artist who would fit into that category.
Right.
They continued to operate publicly as though he was an independent 9, 10, 11 months after he signed. So a lot of the marketing and a lot of the looks that he was receiving, not to say that he couldn't have achieved some of that on his own, but a lot of that was a byproduct of being in the system, right? And so I think transparency is key. A lot of, if not all of the artists who have been attacked on social media with these industry plant claims, they've all developed in the public eye over the past 5 to 7 years. The difference, though, is that no one pays attention till everybody's paying attention.
Right.
And the social media platforms regurgitate what everyone is engaging with, which just adds more fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
So complaining about an artist being an industry plant actually leads to more people believing that they're an industry plant.
Yeah. Yeah. One artist that I constantly see that gets this label of an industry plant is Doechii.
Yeah, I hate it.
I mean, so like, it did feel like to me though, a little bit, and I'm not saying that she's an industry plant because I fully believe what you're saying right now is true, but I do think that when she started to get a little bit of buzz, it accelerated so quickly on social media, and it kind of led me to believe, like, it made me wonder, not believe, but it made me wonder, like, is there something going on behind the scenes where someone is, quote unquote, pressing the button and just like nuclear launch codes get launched and Doechii is on fire everywhere? Like, are you saying that doesn't happen?
I saw this amazing clip from an interview that L.A. Reid did, legendary record executive, and he talked about how after he got his first job with Clive Davis, who, of course, Whitney Houston was one of his biggest signings amongst many. L.A. Reid responsible for like LaFace, so like TLC and Usher and a lot of those Atlanta artists. And L.A. Reid said in this interview that he went to Clive Davis and he was like, "Man, I got this artist. Now is the time. Let's push the button."
Yeah, the proverbial button.
And Clive pointed at a picture of Whitney Houston, and he was like, "That's the button," meaning like the talent. You can pour as much money into an artist as you want. Either there's a market for that artist or there isn't, okay? A lot of artists can benefit from a financial push, no doubt. It costs a lot of money to break an act,
Yeah.
millions
Yeah.
in investment. But if the people don't like what they're being given, it doesn't matter how much money you're putting behind it.
Yeah.
There's not an appetite for this artist. Doechii hit me up in 2020 because she had received a series of emails. She was being courted by several major labels. And she said, hey, Z, I know that you have posted on Twitter about whether or not you can identify what is and isn't like a legitimate, viable email from an actual employee of a record label.
Yeah.
She said, would you mind if I forwarded you the emails I've received?
Wow.
And you can tell me whether or not these are legitimate or a scam. And if you go back to 2020 during the pandemic, there were so many scams going on.
Yeah.
A lot of desperation.
Yep.
People were out of work.
Yep.
And so she sent it over to me. They were legitimate. Not surprised at all. And I said, can we turn this into a teaching moment? Will you give me authority to publish redacted these emails so that we can identify for all young artists how to determine whether or not a cold email from an A&R is real? She's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
We've stayed in touch ever since.
Dope.
I've seen how hard she's worked. I've seen the development time. I've seen the time spent between commercial releases where they just continued to work on her. It just so happened that she finally put a project together that was marketable at a time when TDE was in a position, because she signed to TDE and they have a deal with Capitol.
Yeah.
So they were in a position to focus on her. Sometimes artists don't get that benefit if the label that they sign to is tied up focusing on other artists. So she got the attention she needed. She had the music in place. And the job of every great label is to identify when something's taking off and then do everything they can to exploit that work. That's what record labels are supposed to do. On social media, as I'm sure you've seen, people bemoan the lack of like development and investment, especially in Black music. Now it's happened, right? There's been substantial investment, both in time, resources, and financial. And honestly, when something takes off and is hot, everyone wants a piece of it. Everyone wants to talk about it. Everyone wants to get involved in it. Other brands, other artists, you can feel it. And that's what's happened. And I think it's so, it feels so foreign because it's so unnatural now. It's not common. It used to be common. It's not common anymore. And that's what people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around.
Right, right. So you're saying basically take a seasoned artist who has taken the time to develop themselves, come out with a good project, and timing.
Yeah.
Would you say those three things intersecting is what creates these come-ups, basically, that everyone thinks is an industry plant moment?
Like, you said create a good product, right? So like, obviously music is subjective, right? What is incredible to one set of ears might be terrible to another.
Yeah.
But what I think anyone with a discernible ear can tell is, does this have commercial viability? It might not be for you.
Yeah.
Right? I'm 41. I got a wife and a kid. I have like almost middle-aged responsibilities that consume me. I can identify if something is made for me as the targeted audience versus I'm not that audience, but like there's very clearly an audience for this. And you can't not listen to her music and say, this isn't commercially viable.
Yeah, she's dope.
It absolutely is.
She's definitely dope.
And she's high energy. She's charismatic. She's an incredible performer. She's unique. She's original. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
For sure.
The point I'm trying to make, though, is like you can't look at what she's achieved over the last 12 months and think to yourself, I don't get it. You might be frustrated because you feel like your favorite artist deserves that same level of push.
Yeah.
But they're not in the same situation. They might have signed a direct deal with a label with an A&R who's not there anymore. And they might have a terrible manager who doesn't know how to navigate the business. She signed with a label that has a track record of great success, did a JV with a major label, coming off of a huge public feud that infused a ton of capital into their business. So yeah, you mentioned timing. I think she absolutely benefited from timing.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Can you tell I'm like really passionate about this?
Yeah, I can from your tweets.
It drives me crazy. I think also, I don't want to keep on going on this,
No.
but I think that there is a small subset of folks online who know that when they talk about it, all they're really trying to do is rage bait. Right?
Yeah.
They don't actually believe it,
Yeah.
but they know it'll create great engagement.
Yeah. No, that's true. I want to stay on TDE. So Kendrick recently came to Atlanta for his Atlanta stop of the tour, and I saw some headlines going around that he made $11 million from his Atlanta show. Set a record, like all kinds of crazy stats behind it. And then you retweeted it or re-X'd it and said, basically broke down that 11 million gross, right? Clearly there's a difference between how much you net and how much you gross. Gross is like top line, how much you made all together, not considering expenses. Can you break down, because I feel like we really need to educate people to understand just how expensive touring is. And when someone says this artist made $11 million, is that considering all the expenses that go behind it?
It is not.
So break it down.
Yeah, so touring is expensive, period,
Yeah.
right? Not just at Kendrick Lamar's level, but touring is expensive, period, right? So when you're talking about a superstar level artist like Kendrick and SZA, and I want to make it clear, like the way I'm going to frame this is Kendrick and SZA.
And SZA, yeah.
Because while he's getting top billing, I mean, she's a superstar.
For sure.
Also.
Yep.
And I really dislike the way that a lot of this has been framed online, as if she's not playing a role in this. She sold out her own tours previously. And if they didn't feel like, I feel like they knew that this would guarantee this level of consumption, right?
Yep.
So to make this simple, right, I've seen a few dates where he's done between 11 and 12, but for math, because I'm a communications major, let's say that he grossed 10, okay? When you work with a company like Live Nation or AEG, they're going to give you a guarantee, okay? Again, to make the math simple, let's say his guarantee is $5 million.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Right. So to all the aggregators out there, this is not a news report.
And for clarity, a guarantee is basically a sum of money that the artist is going to make regardless.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So let's say it's on average $10 million grossed per show. And let's say there was like a 40 city tour.
Yeah.
So the contract would say, all right, we're going to guarantee on a per show basis, you're going to have $5 million.
Yeah.
And they do this because they're going to then be able to take a larger share, or at least somewhere in the middle, 50% of the share of the total gross, because they're the ones taking all the risk.
Yeah.
So the promoter is fronting the money for the venue and the production and the security and all like the insurance and the permits and the staffing and the crew, right?
Yeah.
They're handling all of those costs. That's not on Kendrick. So let's say Kendrick gets $5 million. From there, though, he's not netting $5 million because Kendrick has an agent. Kendrick's agent is taking a cut. And Kendrick has a manager. I think he has 2 managers.
Right.
So they're taking their cut. And a lawyer had to review the contract, and so the lawyer's probably taking a cut. And remember, he's not on this tour alone. SZA's on the tour also. Mustard's opening. They both got to get paid as well. Don't forget about Uncle Sam. You got to pay your taxes. And when you're a superstar artist, you can't get away with not paying your taxes. So out of that $5 million, we're looking at somewhere between like maybe 2 to 2.5 net per show. So for simple math, let's say it's 2. right? Let's be conservative. I don't know how many shows are on this tour. Let's say 40. That's still a ton of money. He just made $80 million.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. But let's talk about it realistically, because knowing how difficult it is to be successful as a touring artist, if we don't talk about it responsibly, it is entirely misleading to a generation of artists that are striving to achieve that same success.
Yeah, I mean, when we scale that down, right? Not Kendrick Lamar, but
Right.
Joe Schmo, who is an independent artist just trying to set up his first
Right.
nationwide tour. There's not really a lot of money left at the end of the day, if any. I mean, I know a lot of artists that come home from tour and are actually in the red.
Yeah.
Like they lost money on tour.
Yes.
I don't know how long this has been happening, but I do remember a time where artists can go on tour and it was a viable revenue stream, especially if you were
It was
independent.
the viable revenue.
It was the
stream.
viable revenue stream aside from, music, because we all know how that is. But they would go on tour to make money.
Yep.
And now I feel like what has changed that I'm constantly hearing, because you interviewed
Pooh.
Big Rapper Pooh,
Yeah.
who's in Little Brother, legendary group, independent, and he basically said the same thing. Like it's really, really hard to make money on tour.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and their situation is indicative of a much broader issue. I saw when they announced that Little Brother was going to be going on their farewell tour, they only announced the tour with, I think 10 or 12 dates. And he was apologizing, saying, we wanted to book shows in more cities, but for various reasons, it didn't work out. And fans were complaining about it.
Yeah.
So I've known the guys for years. We featured them on DJ Booth constantly.
I remember.
So I texted him and I said, you could obviously respond to 1 million fans, but I'd love to interview you about this. We could turn it into an educational thread, because what you're experiencing, I want you to know you're not alone. Misery loves company. There's hundreds of other artists who are in the same exact predicament.
Yeah.
You asked what changed. I think it was already headed this way, but the pandemic really, really hurt. You had a lot of, we'll say, small to mid-sized venues. So we're talking about 100, 150, 200, 250 cap rooms, right? Which for a lot of artists, do you want to undersell a larger venue or sell out an appropriately sized venue?
Yeah.
A lot of these venues went out of business.
Yeah.
So as a touring artist, you're left with fewer options for where you can perform in a lot of these cities. And on top of that, because the venues are not always booked and they're looking to get every little last micro penny out of the events that they do host, they started taking a cut from merch sales, which for a lot of artists is what actually put them in the black.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the venue, the label, the promoter, they weren't touching your merch sales.
That's
right?
crazy.
So you could actually be in the red on the production of the show when you account for all of your costs.
Yeah.
Travel, lodging, food, like a DJ or instrumentalists,
Yeah.
if you have your own sound guy, road manager. But then if you did a hefty merch business, you were good.
Yeah.
And now the story that I keep on being told is I came home and either I barely broke even
Crazy.
or I lost money, because at the end of the day, I have to pay out everybody, and then I'm the last to get paid, and is there any money left?
Oh, man.
Brutal.
That is so stressful.
It's brutal, but we need to talk about it, right? The more we talk about it, the more the reality becomes normalized.
Yeah. Man, I can't imagine, because I've been on tour and it is a grind. I don't think people understand, like, unless you are there in that 16 passenger van with 5 to 8 other people crammed inside the same vehicle, traveling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles every day. Like, And then you get to the venue, you got a sound check. You literally get no time, like very, very little downtime. And then you got to perform night after night. It is a grind. It's a grind. And things always go wrong. You know, that's the one thing that I learned about tours. Like, someone crashes the van or it breaks down on the side of the highway, and then you got to get things fixed and replaced. That's another cost and expense that comes out. And so, yeah, I see how a lot of these artists are coming home in the red. You know, the margins are already so thin.
And Pooh told me, he's like, maybe it's different if we're in our early 20s.
Right.
We're a bit more spry. We have more energy.
Yeah.
We don't have family responsibility.
Yeah.
Then you're willing, share hotel rooms or sleep in the van or
100%.
Right. Sacrifice is required to get to that next level. He goes, but at this stage of our lives, we're not sharing hotel rooms.
Oh, no.
If we have to struggle and be away from our families.
Yeah. It's got to be worth it.
Yeah. And I think that there's an unspoken mental and physical toll that takes place. I mean, I've been traveling for 4 days and my brain is mush right now. Despite me being extremely articulate on your podcast.
You are.
But let's be real. If you're on the road for 6 to 12 weeks, you're not eating the same. Your sleep is interrupted. You don't have the time that you need to take care of your body. I mean, and you have to be on. Every night or every other night, right?
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's rough.
Yeah.
Bro. It's rough. Yeah. So, what do you think has to change?
Well, one of the things that Pooh said was, the promoters now, they have generalized mailing lists that are non-specific to any targeted audience. Meaning, if you're a promoter at the venue, the same list is being utilized if you book a hip-hop act or a blues act or a jazz band or a rock act. Wow. Even though those 4 examples I just gave are like very distinct and different audience sets. So that's not good. Used to be you had a lot of independent promoters that were not affiliated with or did not work for the venues.
Right.
And they specialized in certain areas. Right.
Yeah.
So we have the 21 and over crowd at certain venues where we know the bar is going to kill it, and punk rock acts and hip hop perform well. And a lot of those people aren't in the business anymore. They got out. Also, Live Nation, right? Live Nation is both a promoter and an owner of venues, right? So you have all of these venues where they are serving as both the venue and the promoter. They're double dipping, right? And it's very difficult to do business in that marketplace. Let's also talk about Ticketmaster, right? Because of all of the junk fees that have been added on to these tickets, and because of the rising costs of literally everything, which makes not only touring but life more expensive, you're pricing out a lot of people from the market. And artists know, based on the information they have about their audience, if we go above a certain ticket price, no one's going to come out. That's why you see so many tours canceled, because they have to justify the high ticket price, but they don't have the audience that can afford to go to those shows.
Crazy.
So to answer your question, what has to change? I don't know. I really don't, because this is not really only a conversation about touring. This is a conversation about economics and affordability.
Yeah. It almost feels like to me that there's got to be some type of new model that gets presented or becomes the prominent. I don't know, but it just feels broken.
Well, I'll tell you what else led to it being broken is the festival circuit, right? You have, 40, 50, 60 large-scale festivals every year, okay? And the ticket prices on those are astronomical. We're talking, the Uber ride over here, the guy told me he's going to be in Chicago for Lollapalooza in August, and he spent $700 for 3 days, okay? So if I'm a fan and I'm thinking to myself, for $700, I get to go see we'll call it
Everyone.
like 50 acts.
Yeah.
Right? So you're getting bang for your buck.
Yep.
It's easy to rationalize spending that money. And a lot of people are doing so using the buy now, pay later, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like people
Right.
are using their credit cards.
They
and-
can't even afford it, right?
Right.
So then when you show up in a city and you're just one act on one night and you're charging $75, $80, $100, that same fan who rationalized spending $700 to see 50 acts, they're having a hard time committing to spending 100 plus fees to see one. And they could love you, but like either you have the money or you don't, or you feel comfortable, charging it.
So the solution is, I don't know if it's a solution, but I think the only viable way for an artist who tours is to have a really, really solid fan base. Is that like it that gets you closer to a profitable tour?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a fan base. You have to have community. You have to have people who are willing to support you above and beyond streaming your music.
Yeah.
Right? I think you also need a team, a manager, and an agent who are realistic. And I think often you have people in an artist's orbit that have their own agenda based on the financial ramifications for themselves, right? Where artists are booking venues they have no business booking at points in their career.
Yeah.
It used to be, you do small shows like bars and clubs, and then you'd work your way up to small cap rooms and then mid-size rooms and then larger rooms like we're talking 1,500, 2,000 plus. And then, if that trajectory continued, you would go to larger stadiums and right, and then you're playing the Super Bowl, right? And then you're Kendrick Lamar,
Yeah.
right? I mean, people forget like Kendrick used to do Best Buy, right?
Crazy.
Kendrick used to perform at the local Best Buy.
Yeah. There's footage. I don't know if it was at Best Buy, but like a small show.
It was Best
somewhere.
Buy.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, the other day, I just, out of curiosity, was looking up a clip that I remember Jack Harlow had been interviewed by Zane Lowe. And actually, the premise of the interview was talking about how people were accusing him of being an industry plant, to bring this full circle.
Yeah.
And he was saying how, like, he would go to college campuses and perform for like 10 people. And he was at South by Southwest and A3C and performed for like 10 people.
I remember, so I have a Jack Harlow story. When Jack was still an unknown artist, he was performing at A3C in Atlanta. This was around the time that I was still on Funk Volume, so maybe 2012, 2013, maybe somewhere around there. And Jack and I had recently gotten connected through a mutual friend. He was back in Atlanta for A3C. He couldn't get into his own show because he didn't have his credentials with him. He was supposed to be performing upstairs in this tiny room.
Yeah.
And so he called me because he knew I was there. And I had to come down and let him in. I had to tell the security guard, like, yo, he's good. Don't worry about him. And brought him up to his own show. There must have been 20 people in the room, maybe. And so, yeah, I can personally vouch that Jack Harlow is not an industry plant. He's been doing this for a long time. It's crazy. It's just crazy to see that trajectory happen in real time, especially when you know someone like that.
Yeah, and like South by Southwest is a perfect example of how much that has been commercialized and changed over the years. DJ Booth used to host artist showcases at South by.
Right.
And in 2010, I think, don't quote me on this, we had a show at the Dizzy Rooster, and the bill was Black Hippie, so that's Kendrick, Absol, Schoolboy, and J-Rock, Macklemore and Ryan Lewis,
Crazy.
Big Crit,
Crazy.
and then we also had a bunch of cool artists like Freeway, and Static Selecta. And the point I'm trying to make is that just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Right. But that's indicative of like a larger change across the entire industry, which is development is happening in real time for everyone to see, but no one sees it until something takes off.
Right, right. I want to talk about something that annoys me. A lot of times when I talk to independent artists or just get on social media, one thing I'll see a lot is like, I'm not going to do this because Kendrick doesn't do it. Why should I? Or The Weeknd doesn't do this. He doesn't have to promote himself on social media every day and post videos. Like, why should I have to do this? It annoys me to no end whenever I see that. Can you break down why that is never a good idea?
Well, just so you know, I feel the same way you do. So, yeah, it's quite frustrating. Anytime you're comparing yourself to an established artist, you've lost.
Yeah.
It's over. So don't do it. So I could end my ramble there, okay? I think it's important to contextualize it though. 2014 was the low point in the music business over the last 60 years,
Yep.
okay? And since then we've been on an upward trajectory. So over the last 11 years, we're doing this,
Yeah.
right? But around that time, it was very difficult. I think the industry only generated like $2 billion in revenue across
Right.
the entire business, right? Anyone who came of age prior to 2014, so prior to the modern streaming era, when they were introduced, they were able to generate a certain type of fan that is fundamentally different than the type of fan that's generated now, okay? And that's because of how they discovered them
Yeah.
and what that relationship was like.
Right.
Kendrick and Weeknd both came of age before 2014.
Yeah.
Okay, their introduction to us during the blog era predates the streaming era.
The blog era.
So they have an audience baked in. They can take time between projects more than an artist would be able to or have the benefit of today. They can try different things creatively that might veer away from what the expectation is for them. And both of them have done that, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would have guessed that after Kendrick's debut, he would have made To Pimp a Butterfly.
Right.
And The Weeknd has pivoted from R&B to pop
Yep.
seamlessly, right? And they can do that, again, because of when they came of age. When you have that loyalty, you have that autonomy and that flexibility. Artists today don't have that. It is what have you done for me lately?
Yes.
You haven't been around long enough
Yes.
and have that gravitas to be able to do that. Plus, they are incredible storytellers,
Yeah.
right? And we have a catalog's worth of material to pull from. Whereas an artist today, they don't have the catalog, they don't have the fan base baked in, and they don't want to promote themselves on social media. You can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, do you think an artist like The Weeknd or a J. Cole, I guess because of their music and their presence and their influence on culture, it's made them relevant to a new generation of fans. But I think for a lot of artists, they kind of struggle with that part of staying relevant. And so they might have the fan base that initially fell in love with them when they first came out, but now those fans are 40 years old. They have families. They've moved on in their life. Maybe they're still a fan and they'll come to a concert, but like, you think aging out of an artist's career like happens? Like, what do you have to do to stay relevant?
It does happen. That's natural. There are studies that show us that we reach our peak music curiosity in our early teen years.
Yeah.
So our tastes for life are basically formed in adolescence. By the time we're fully fleshed out as adults, we sort of just like are stubborn in our tastes,
Right.
The only way to avoid the scenario that you described is to constantly evolve artistically.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that that's what has happened with the artists that we've just used as examples. I think a lot of the criticism, fair or unfair, that actually Drake has received, not just post beef with Kendrick, but over the last few years, is where's the evolution? You're getting older. Where is your comfort level when it comes to talking about where you're at in life?
Yeah.
At least that's a criticism that I've seen levied against him.
Yeah. And it's kind of fair, to be honest. I mean, just as a fan, I love Drake. I love Drake's music. I love Kendrick's music. But yeah, I mean, I kind of do understand that argument. Like, when do you start maturing in some of the songs and the themes and the concepts of your music?
Yeah, like the ability to grow with your audience.
Right.
Right. And look, the truth is that you should never, as an artist, make decisions purely with your audience in mind.
Sure.
Rick Rubin has this incredible quote, like, the audience comes last.
Yeah.
So every artist should be motivated to do what they feel creatively, and either that will resonate or it won't with fans. But again, I think that you have a longer leash if, again, you came of age before the beginning of the streaming era.
Right. If you had to list 3 things that you think make Kendrick Lamar an incredible artist, a great artist, as someone who has seen his come up and his journey, what would you say?
Well, first of all, he's an incredible songwriter, right? When it's all said and done, he will be inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, right? He's a Pulitzer Prize winning, multi-Grammy nominated legacy artist who has an incredible pen. And I think I have a lot of criticisms of the modern music industry, but because of how fast it moves, I think writing in general has suffered a great deal. Artists feel like they have to produce more and more quickly.
Yeah.
And when you rush your creative process, the writing is what suffers.
Yeah.
And Kendrick is extremely thoughtful and deliberate when it comes to his writing, and it shows. Okay, so songwriting, I would say, is number 1.
Okay.
Okay. Number 2, everyone loves to use this phrase, I'm a world builder, right? Where I'm going to create this world and invite you into it. Okay. And it sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But very
It's like,
few.
what? You build worlds?
Yeah, but very few can do it, right? Kendrick's a world builder.
For sure.
And it's not just the songwriting, it's everything around the music. It's the visual accompaniment, and it's the artwork, and it's the production at his shows, right? So they're all intermingling, they're all cohesive, and I mean, you can't not say, like, this is the work of a world builder.
Yeah.
And then finally, he's a storyteller. Right. So you could be a great songwriter and not necessarily even tell your own stories, but there's been a theme throughout his entire journey where each album has a story that he's telling. And his ability to evolve and storytell poetically, I mean, he's one of one. Really, when he said there ain't no big 3, there's big me, he wasn't lying. I mean, no offense to J. Cole and no offense to Drake, because they're both incredible. And I think we should be able to say that.
Yeah.
You're both incredible. You're not Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah. And he moves culture. He
does.
I think that's a big one. Okay. So here's the thing about, I want to stay on like being an independent artist.
Yeah. This is what I love talking about the most, by the way.
Okay, good, good. So you'll really like this one. So one piece of advice that I always find myself giving to artists is to stay independent. I think it affords you the most control, the most creativity, and keeps you in the driver's seat of your business and your fate as an artist, right? But then I go on social media and I talk to a lot of upcoming independent artists, and then I realize so many people are just not built to be an independent artist because of how much work it takes. what would you tell an artist who is supremely talented, that might have great music, but just isn't good at using social media and doesn't know how to do the other stuff that comes with it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I want to preface by saying it's very challenging to give broad spectrum advice.
Yeah.
Because there are so many factors to consider on an individual level. For example, what type of music do you make? Do you have a team, or are you operating solo?
Yeah.
How patient are you? How organized are you? How efficient are you? What are your expectations for a career? Do you want to have a moment? Do you want to have longevity? Do you want to have a legacy? Are you comfortable being a mid-tier artist? And how I would define a mid-tier artist is someone who is fortunate enough to make a living purely off of music and all of the ancillary revenue streams from music without having to supplement that with another job. But you're never going to be played on radio, and you're never going to tour stadiums, right? Is that acceptable?
Right.
So I think there's lots of
Factors.
caveats to this advice. Generally speaking, I think every artist should remain independent, regardless of all of those factors, until they've built up an audience, no matter how long it takes.
Yeah.
If you're able to do that, so you're able to show proof of concept in the marketplace, that will allow you to pick and choose options with labels or distributors that could provide operational and foundational support and funding, but with terms that allow you to maintain control and ownership of your work, and freedom and creative control and autonomy over your music.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess getting there is the hard part, but like the advice that I would also add is like just kind of building your own team of people around you who can provide you as much of that support on your way up until you get to that point. And it doesn't have to be people, obviously, that are like professionals, but just like homies. Like
They got to care, though, right? I
they
think
gotta care. Yeah,
I always say that's gotta be number one.
For sure.
You got to care. You want to surround yourself with people who care, because if you care, you're willing to learn,
yeah,
and you're willing to relearn and constantly go through the necessary education to stay up on all the latest changes to our business, right?
Yeah.
Because let's say you were an artist manager 5 years ago, and your wife had a baby and you dipped out, and now your kid is 4.5 or 5, and you want to get back into the game, but you haven't been involved over that entire period of time. Just like waking up from a coma after 4 years and realizing there's a new president, right?
Yeah.
You got to figure out what is the industry doing now, because it was vastly different 5 years ago.
Right.
And that's probably the hardest part about all of this now is, historically speaking, there wasn't much change in our business over 10-year periods.
Yeah.
Okay. Typically, it would take at least 10 years before a new format even came out, right? You had 8 tracks, and then you had cassette tapes, and then you had CD, and then you had the piracy era and digital downloads, and now streaming, right? But just in the last few years, we've cycled through multiple stages of NFTs. Remember those?
God, such a horrible.
Right.
I hated it.
Me too.
It was the worst.
And it's because there were so many people trying to scam artists, utilizing the invest in your future, snake oil salesman trick. And now it's AI. And we've already gone through multiple iterations of the AI forefront.
Yeah.
And so things are changing so rapidly, you have no choice but to stay up on game.
Right.
And so find someone who cares enough to constantly educate themselves on this business.
The interesting point that you made was mid-tier artists.
Yeah.
Because I feel like one of the big shifts that we've seen in the last I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 years, is this idea of like you can be an artist with a super loyal niche fan base and still have a successful career as an artist.
Yes.
And fly under the radar, not necessarily be one of the artists that are getting mentioned in the media or, maybe not making the Billboard charts, but like making great money off of your streaming, touring, merch, and all the other things that come with that. Who in your mind is like a successful mid-tier artist that you respect?
I mean, I was going to say Big X the Plug, but he's probably elevated from that level.
I feel like Big X is going to get to the point where he is definitely not mid-tier anymore, but like
He's
very
probably
highly.
he's probably already there,
Yeah.
right? He's operating as a major label artist, but signed to a distro deal with United Masters.
Right.
So that's one example that came to mind. La Russell
Yeah.
is another.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this misconception that there's no money in music, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And anytime you ever question whether or not there's money in a particular industry, do research to see who is investing in that arena.
Yeah.
There is so much institutional money flooding the music business, and the reason is because we now have a decade worth of data to show us that music revenue is steady. Markets fluctuate. The stock market, it does this.
Interesting.
The bond market does this. If our president posts to Truth Social and with some inflammatory remarks
Yeah.
about another country, we could be at war and the markets will do this.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, people keep streaming music.
True.
And catalog is consistent. And so I think the misconception is that there's no money in streaming because we're only looking at present day revenue generation. But the biggest difference between traditional physical product sales and streaming is, yeah, they had higher margins and more money was made up front, but no one was going back to the record store 10 years later
Yeah.
and buying a physical copy of a CD.
Right.
But people keep on streaming catalog forever.
Forever. Yeah.
And so if you are a mid-tier artist, you don't even have to be prolific, but you just build up a fantastic catalog over time. I mean, you're talking about compounded interest,
Yeah.
right? The money's just going to continue to come through the door.
That's true. That's true. Are you paying attention at all to the Christian music space and the artists that are thriving in that space?
I'm paying attention to what the data shows us on Audiomack. And what I can tell you is that inspirational and gospel are two of the fastest growing genres on our service. So the market for this music, at least historically speaking, used to skew older, and now it's skewing younger. And younger people are on streaming services.
Yep.
So that is as much of an answer as I can give you.
I think
with
it's
that
really
question.
interesting, bro, because I recently just did a whole project with No Big Deal, who
I saw that. Congratulations.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah. Minnesota? Is he from Minnesota?
He is from Tennessee, like Middle Tennessee. And I discovered him during the pandemic. He duetted one of my beats on TikTok.
Smart.
And I was like, who is this dude? Like, he is going crazy. So I followed him. Years later, last year, he posted on Instagram saying that he wanted to lock in for 7 days with the producer and knock out a whole project. And one of our mutual fans tagged me in that post, and I was already following him. I was already a fan, but we didn't have an opportunity to work on music together. So I replied, and I was like, come to Atlanta. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And within a week, we rented an Airbnb in Flowery Branch, Georgia, recorded an entire EP, 9 songs in 7 days. We cut it down to 6 songs, and got Project Pat on our lead single. The song went absolutely nuts. it's like almost at 1 million streams already, and we just dropped it like a month ago. But I'm realizing a shift is happening. I think that people are getting burnt out on low vibrational, negative music, especially in hip hop, right?
Yeah.
And I love rap, I love hip hop, but I'm like getting older and my taste in music is changing. And I just feel that there's a shift happening in music where people are getting fed up with that type of music and they're looking for something more inspirational, uplifting, positive, that still sounds good, that still has great songwriting, but just a more positive message.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that younger Christian artists are changing that genre of music and skewing it much younger now. You
Yeah.
know?
We're seeing the same thing in Africa, right?
Yeah.
Where Audiomack is absolutely huge, right? You have artists who are making such incredibly positive, joyous, uplifting music.
100%.
And you feel good listening.
Yeah.
Now everybody seeks out music for different reasons, right? Sometimes you're trying to find someone else who's going through the same shit you are, right? And that's valid. For me, I'm at a point in my life where I just want to feel good.
Yeah.
Right? Music is an escape to glorious utopia, right? And so I'm constantly trying to find that thing. I'm obviously going to stereotype here, but so much music that's coming out, at least domestically, the artists sound like they're miserable. And perhaps they are.
Yeah.
Or they're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
The grand irony, of course, is no matter how difficult life is for you here in the United States, you have electricity, you have running water, you have clean air, you have access to food and medicine. Some of the most incredible works that I've heard over the past few years coming out of Africa, it's dire straits,
Wow.
And the ability to overcome circumstance, channel frustration through music, and what comes out the other end is this incredible, again, to your point, like feel good, uplifting, inspirational work is incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. So needless to say, I'm a big fan of just like that, not even specifically just Christian music, but just any music that feels positive and uplifting. And I think we're going to continue to see a rise in that type of music.
I agree.
Let's talk about fan accounts.
Okay.
You tweeted about this. You called out that a lot of these fan accounts, especially on X but all over social media really, are run by digital agencies and labels.
Correct.
Where are you getting your sources from, bro? Who?
I can't give them up, but what I will say is there's two scenarios, right? Scenario number one is labels and digital agencies create them and then grow them. The other is there are actually accounts that are organically grown and then they buy them, right, to supercharge them. I hate it, but let's be honest. Everybody's on social. This is how music is marketed.
Right.
The sad part, though, is that most of the people who are operating these accounts, they're doing everything they can to create conversation, but so little of the conversation is about the music.
Right.
It's about first week sales.
Right.
It's about first day streams. It's about concert ticket revenue. Is it all related? Yeah.
For sure.
But it's not about the actual music.
Yeah. That part is frustrating, I think. It kind of signals to artists that I have to create things for the algorithm versus art that I really care about, that means something to me and to other people. I got to kind of be a gimmick a little bit. And I think that deters a lot of artists from focusing more on their craft and more on their music. And I think that's why music is probably where it is right now. with a lot of, just like quick microwavable music, you know?
Yeah, for any artists who are watching this, I would encourage them to do some of the things that I do to make social less toxic for me, that will allow you to utilize it as a tool to advance your career, but not hurt your mental well-being.
Yeah.
So first off, create lists, right? You're curating them. So that allows you to control what you see as opposed to the awful algorithm on the For You tab.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people will say, how did you find this tweet that you responded to? You don't follow this person. People at this point know that I will address these topics. And so a lot of my followers actually hop into my DMs and be like, hey, I saw this. I thought you maybe would want to address it. So like the community's doing the work for me. It's beautiful. I also rarely post in real time, right? So a lot of what you all see is scheduled.
Really?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I will have an idea. I'll jot it down. I won't immediately send it out.
Yeah.
And then what I will do is I'll go back to it and say like, all right, can this be misconstrued?
Yeah.
Is this the right tone that I want to take? Will people be mad at me because they don't understand what I'm trying to convey? Am I articulating my thoughts well?
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll workshop it a bit more, okay? And then I'll schedule it to go out at another time. And so I would encourage artists to do the same. Don't spend an inordinate amount of time on social media. Figure out how you want to market your music and what you want your brand to look like on social. Come up with a content and posting schedule, and then create and schedule, but do not spend time in real time on social if you can help it.
I feel like that's a lot to ask for an artist that.
Try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try. It doesn't have to be exactly what I do. And again, I'm not an artist, so what works for me might not work for someone else. What I would hope, though, is that someone would have heard what I just said and thought, like, I can take one piece of that and adopt it into what I'm currently doing and maybe modify a little. No?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of do the same thing where a lot of my tweets, I just save them in my drafts.
Yeah.
I don't schedule them, but I save the idea so that I can come back to it later and then kind of re-edit and evaluate, is this still a good idea to post?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I completely hear what you're saying, but it took me a long time to get to that point where, I don't know, I just feel like as an artist, it feel like we were kind of having a conversation before the podcast started about how things always feel urgent, right? There's this sense of urgency, and I do feel like there's a little bit of magic in the moment when you're feeling something and you express it in a way in that moment. You know what I mean? And when you let it sit and marinate for too long, I think that the message kind of loses some of that magic a little bit. I guess it depends on like what you're trying to say and what the message is ultimately, but I don't know. I do feel like that's how a lot of artists probably feel, is like, I'm feeling a certain type of way right now. I got to get this off my chest.
I understand what you're saying. I think it's valid. Perhaps the way that I look at it is, as an artist, you are a brand. Whether you want to be or not, you are, period.
Yeah.
Okay? And everything that you do online is a representation of your brand.
Yeah.
Fair or unfair, that's just what it is. No actual brand, so an organization, a company, not a human, would on a whim just tweet something out.
Yeah.
Right? It's, crowdsourced, it's collaborative, I would hope vetted.
Yeah.
And granted, in many cases we've seen where corporations have erred.
Yeah.
You think to yourself, how is it possible that many people had their eyes on this?
Oh, yeah.
And you still let this go live?
Yeah.
So even following my recommendations, it's not foolproof.
Sure.
That said, I think this idea of like throwing caution to the wind and like just going live with a thought in the moment on a whim, it's not inherently bad, but are you keeping in mind, is this communication an accurate representation of what I'm trying to convey or not?
Yeah.
At least just have that in the back of your mind.
Yeah. That's fair. Sometimes it's a fine line, but I get it.
Yeah, it's a check. It's a check and balance for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. All right, last question. How are we doing on time, by the way?
Good.
Are we at like an hour-ish?
Hour and 6.
Okay, perfect. Last question. Do you think that Drake's image has been tarnished from all the legal stuff that has been happening after the whole Kendrick thing? I have a hard time keeping up with just like all the legal stuff going on with Drake and his legal team. Do you think it affects his brand or his image at all as an artist?
Yes and no. So anybody who is a loyal fan, this doesn't change anything.
They don't care.
No,
They're like Team Drake, no ride or die, no matter what.
100%. Is it possible that you have folks who are more casual fans who are on the fringe, who they would listen when he drops an album, but they're not going to see him live and they're not buying his merch and they don't rock OVO hoodies, right? Is it possible that like this was the straw that broke the camel's back? Maybe. All you have to do though, and yeah, numbers can be misleading, is look at consumption of his music over the past 12 and a half months.
Okay.
And he hasn't released an album during that time.
Yeah.
And he's doing just fine.
Yeah.
So this didn't stop people from continuing to listen to his music.
Yeah.
I think he'll be just fine. I always believe every artist, regardless of circumstance, whether they've lost a rap battle and sued their record label or not, you're only one record away from everybody forgetting about it.
That's true.
Right? I don't think Doechii is that record, okay?
Yeah, I don't either.
It has to be a song from a solo Drake project.
Yep.
I would love for him to go take a multi-year vacation, make people miss you,
Yeah.
come back strong. That's not going to happen. It's not in his DNA.
Yeah.
That's never been in his DNA. Music is everything for him. So I think we're probably going to get an album before the end of the year. And there better be at least one record on that album that's a monster. And
Yeah.
if it is, then that will become the larger part of the narrative, which is he overcame. He conquered. Drake reigns supreme.
Yeah, that's going to be crazy. Do you think that there is such a thing as bad publicity?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think he has taught a masterclass in bad publicity over the last year. Think about it. If there's no string of petitions and then lawsuits, right? If he doesn't go down this path, so he just lets the story try to slowly fizzle out, right? Kendrick still performs at the Super Bowl. That's still gonna happen. It's still a talking point. That was in February. We're in May now, and the legal side has not been resolved. This is going to continue to linger, okay? We would have already all moved on.
Yeah.
So Drake, I guess inadvertently, gave this new life and has extended the conversation for far longer than it needed to remain an active conversation.
Right.
Self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we'll see when his next project comes out. I'm sure he's working on it as we speak.
Yeah,
Like-
and you know what? And I'll be the first to press play, or maybe not
Same.
like the first, because I go to bed at 10 o'clock, and they stupidly still release music at midnight.
Yeah,
Eastern.
why has that not been changed? Like so when me and Dill just dropped our project,
Yeah.
I fell asleep the night that our
You
project
should have gone off cycle.
Is that okay?
That's releasing Monday through Thursday
okay.
instead of midnight Thursday into Friday. I've talked to.
But it still releases at midnight, no?
No, you can release it anytime throughout the day. That's the beauty of the streaming era is you don't have to do what the industry does, which is, all right, everybody, it's Friday at midnight.
So they just do that so that it maximizes the
So the purpose originally was to align the entire globe, right? A universal release date time. This was meant to curb piracy, but also for the full tracking week for sales and,
Right.
and charting eligibility.
Right.
But here's the truth. 99.999% of new releases will not have a shot at charting full for
Yeah.
the first week. So it doesn't matter.
True.
So I'm of the belief, why not release earlier in the week? Remember, it used to be New Music Tuesday,
Yeah.
okay? You're giving your audience multiple days while they're in the same routine. Everybody's Monday through Friday, largely, I don't say everybody, most people, their weekdays are fixed, their weekends are variable, okay? As a result, if you release on a Monday or Tuesday, you can get into a routine where you press play and then you stick with that album or EP or project for multiple days. What happens now? You release on Friday. If you don't press play on Friday, the weekend hits, you don't have time, and then by Monday, you either forgot about it or you moved on. The weekend interrupts the listening, and it also interrupts the marketing because record labels go home for the weekend. So yeah, I'm team bring back New Music Tuesday. I'm team release off cycle. I'm team do not follow what the majors do, because if you aren't a major label artist, then you're not playing the same game.
Yeah.
And even the majors, to their credit, have adopted off cycle releases. Not to the degree that it would be beneficial to a lot of developing artists, but a lot of them are now going on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and even Thursday, but not at midnight.
Yeah. Interesting. Z, you're the man.
Kato,
I
you're the
appreciate
man.
you. Thank you. Very, very informative, insightful. I called it from the beginning. Is there anything else that you want to plug? Where can people follow you or check you out?
Yeah, you can follow me on X, RIP Twitter, and Instagram. It's my name, Brian Zisook. And of course, if you haven't already, download the Audiomack app. It's free for iOS or Android, and become one more of our 41 million plus global monthly active users.
Boom. Appreciate you,
Thank
bro.
you, brother.
It's good seeing you,
Appreciate
man.
it. Likewise.
Yeah.